In D.C., many of us youth were in bands, and I was so overwhelmed by a band called Minor Threat that was headed up by my friend Ian McNally, and coming from the same town as the Bad Brains. All of us, us mere mortals and all the other bands, realized who the bosses were in town. It was Minor Threat and the Bad Brains. And so my dubious musical history before Black Flag,
weren't you in? I'm like, yeah, I was kind of. Well, maybe there'll be a PA here one day. Anyway.
You guys can hear us anyway, right?
Yeah. We don't need this, do we?
Loud mouth.
And so that was the musical history for me, where we had 30-second songs. The set length was about 11 minutes. Most of it was the band yelling, "Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready?" And then we would just destroy some small, poorly written song we had written. Then Minor Threat would go on stage, and you could hear every lyric. They played with such precision. You knew every word. And so those days, to me, I was more the fan who got to be in a band for a minute. And so that's why I rarely mention that band, just because.
But that band is a great band. They had one record out, and they also on a compilation or two. And you know, when I talk about the songwriting that was going on with that genre of bands, Henry's band was as good as it got as far as I was concerned. I mean, Minor Threat were great, Void were great, The Faith were great, Government Issue were great. All these bands were really, really good in songwriting. And what impressed me with SOA is like they had their own sound. And all those songs, if you ever get that SOA EP, listen to it. I mean, it's fucking great punk rock songwriting. I'm like a huge ass record collector, as is Henry. And I've gone through years and years of amassing, you know, tons of records, and I go through these years where I get rid of so much, but I never touch those, because those to me are really significant records, I think, in like American underground music.
Yeah, Ian's label, Discord, he made really essential listening, and growing up in that scene, it was a DIY scene. In those days, you would have a glue stick party. Everyone would bring a Yoo-Hoo glue stick. You'd go to someone's house and cut out Discord sleeves, fold and glue them, and insert the record. So if you have the original pressings of Discord 7-inches, those are handmade by myself, people in bands, everyone's friends. You'd all kind of just sit in someone's living room until the early hours, just cutting and gluing, and you got like a record as pay. And so those records are basically hand-rolled. And it gave me a very DIY ethic, because I watched Ian build this label up from the ground, and now it's a very established independent label. I went from there to Black Flag, which again was SST Records, another independent label that was putting out bands like the Minutemen and the Stains and Saccharine Trust, and later the Meat Puppets and Husker Du, and eventually Sonic Youth and the Bad Brains and Soundgarden. But in those early days, it was like 3 or 4 bands. Everyone was starting, and we did everything ourselves, from laying out the records, laying out the flyers. And a lot of bands did. Thurston was laying out his records, you're recording the records yourself, you don't have much help, you're innovating because there's no one there to help you, you have no cushion because you have no major label signing. Everything is, you have to be smart, because if you're not smart and innovative, you will not have a band or a record in a year, because you'll just be eaten up by the eventualities of not selling enough records. So, both of us have been in this world of DIY, jumping in and out of the major label world and the corporate world, but maintaining the art. I started a publishing company in 1983, spurred on by the fact that I was living on the road, and like many independent bands in those days, getting America in the teeth. You'd go and play in some pretty tough parts of towns all over America. Law enforcement was not always friendly, and bouncers were not always friendly. Promoters and agents were often quite dishonest. And so you had a tale to tell. And with my meager earnings, I would buy notebooks at the drugstore and fill them with what I would see. And in 1982 or so, I thought I'll start a book company, that's what I'll do. And knowing that no one would read my handwritten folded chapbooks, I went bravely on, inspired by Henry Miller and people like that, and just the DIY ethic. 30 years later, I have a staff, an office, a publishing company, and the latest book I did is this one that some of you have, that Thurston is sitting with. It's the first photo book I've ever done. And rock and roll will get you pretty far and wide. If you like to travel, you can be broke and well-traveled if you're in a band. Like, you'll meet poor musicians who've seen Japan, Australia, Eastern Europe. You know, they have crazy stories, because rock and roll gets you pretty far and wide. In the 90s,
somewhere in the 90s, people say, you get to travel a lot. I say, yeah, but I've never been to Africa. And that was always like my, well, and I thought to myself, well, why is that the sticking point? I should get to Africa. And so I made a rule for myself. I'm going to go to Africa once a year, if I can, and see how that works. I'm just going to travel for the hell of it. And so, months later, I find myself being roundly teased by Maasai tribesmen who thought my tattoos were hilarious. And so I was standing 4 feet above me, looking at me, grabbing my arm like it belongs to someone else, like bringing their friends over. And I was getting on a landing strip in Kichwa Tembo on the Tanzanian border, getting laughed at. They're holding my arm up. These basketball player-sized men, incredibly amazing. And I said, okay, this will do. I'm going to do this very often. And that's when I started bringing a camera to take photos of what I would see. And as us guys are wont to do over the years, you must up the gear, because men in gear, that's quite a thing. As you women are, you're so well aware of it. They always have to get more gear. It's compensating for something. And as the years went on, I did more and more travel, and my points of destination was never a vacation, was my idea. And I was one of the custodians of the Bush administration, in that he wasted my time and killed my fellow Americans and Iraqis and people all over the world for 8 solid years. And I would follow behind him, cleaning up the blood and guts and the tears by being a member of the USO, which I got a lot of heat for. Like, if you don't like war, why you hang out with soldiers? Well, because Congress starts wars, not soldiers. They're sent in to do the bidding. And so I would go to Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, and I'd see all manner of things. I'd go to Walter Reed, I'd go to Bethesda Medical and see men with no testicles, no brains, no eyes, no whatever. I started bringing a camera to these places, got better gear, and at one point, being the DIY boy that I am, and, you know, headstrong, somewhere in the 90s, or in the early part of this century, I said, I know what I'll do. I'll make a photo book. That'll show them. And I've written many travel books, because I sleep with the owner of the record company or the book company every night. That's me. And there's no saying no to me, especially when it's me talking to myself. And so anyway, I thought the idea for the book should be, I will go far and wide. I don't like taking photos of landscape because, as Bruce Lee used to say about boards don't hit back. Landscape doesn't hit back. I like to get up close to people, not in a confrontational way. I'm not paparazzi. I'm not trying to inspire a fight. I'm not a tough guy. I'm not looking for trouble. But people interest me. I find Homo sapiens, the species, to be incredibly beautiful. I mean, you go see them all over the world, and I'm not trying to sound like some stupid Rudyard Kipling type. You know, I love these people from Suriname. I've got 5 in my backyard. That's not what I'm after. But when you see men and women in Senegal, you see the beautiful bone structure of their face, the complexity of the skin, the dynamic of the jawline. I want a photo of that. When you see some village elder or some ancient, you know, elderly person in Tibet, and you see the history of the world in that face. Or when you run into interesting-looking people in Kyrgyzstan, you can see the evidence of Stalin, in that a Chinese skull shape, but light eyes and light hair. That goes back to Stalin arbitrarily placing white people all through Central Asia and breaking the landmass up arbitrarily into all the different stands. This is fascinating to me, and I want a photo. I want to meet these people. And